Thanksgiving dinner. Turkey carved. Candles flickering. Laughter bouncing off the walls like it belonged to someone else's house. My son, my only son, stood up with his glass of wine and said, loud and proud, "To the future, Mom's work husband is the kind of man I want to become." Forks paused midair. A few chuckled. Some raised eyebrows. Her boss, the man sitting directly across from me in my own house, legs crossed like he owned the place, tilted his head back and laughed like he'd just won something. My wife. She practically glowed, giggling, leaning into his arm like a schoolgirl at prom. And me? I just took a sip of my bourbon. Not a word. Because I found silence is heavier than shouting. And heavier things tend to break bones when they land. I looked around the table. Faces I'd known for years, some decades, nodding along like this was some harmless inside joke. Like I wasn't the one who paid the mortgage, the tuition, the medical bills. Like I was the ghost of Thanksgivings past, tolerated out of habit, and replaced emotionally long ago. No one even looked at me for a reaction. That's when I reached under the table, pulled out the leather folder, and stood up. Before dessert, I said calmly, I wanted to give everyone something small, a token of appreciation. I handed out sealed cream envelopes, one by one. My wife blinked, confused. Her boss smirked. "You didn't have to do this," he said, half laughing. "Oh, but I did." When he opened his envelope, his face changed before the paper was halfway out. A tremble in the hand, a twitch in the jaw, the smirk gone. He read it twice, then whispered, barely audible, "This is the board termination notice signed by." He didn't finish. He couldn't, because he finally read the name at the bottom. And it wasn't the name of the man they thought they'd been mocking all night. It was mine. I sat down, sliced another bite of turkey, chewed slowly. Silence hung in the air like smoke after a fire. My wife's fork clinked against her plate. My son looked pale. Her boss looked like he was staring down the barrel of something he hadn't seen coming. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to explain, because the one thing everyone at that table finally understood, too late, was that I'd never truly been out of the picture. I was simply watching, taking notes, waiting for the moment the curtain would fall. By the way, if you've listened this far and you're part of the 90% who haven't subscribed yet, do it now. It keeps stories like this alive, and our team fueled to keep digging deeper. And trust me, the next chapters, you're going to want to be here for those. Back at the table, my wife finally found her voice. "Is this real?" she asked, voice tight. I didn't answer. Her boss? He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. His hands trembled as he folded the paper back into the envelope, like that might somehow undo what he read. It wouldn't, because the date stamped on it was yesterday, and the person who signed it wasn't just some board member. It was the majority shareholder. Me, the real man behind the curtain, the ghost in the spreadsheets, the one they forgot had teeth. 2 weeks earlier, I was sitting at a different table, a long walnut conference table. This one in a room where voices don't rise and people don't interrupt. The air was sterile, but not dead, just focused. Glass walls, black leather chairs, and a view that made egos shrink on entry. The kind of boardroom you walk into once you've already made it, and speak only if you've earned the right. Across from me sat Charles D. Forrester, 78, founder of the company where my wife had worked for 11 years. The man who built the firm from a rented cubicle and a leased copier into a nationally recognized management consultancy. A man whose time was done, and who wanted to make sure his exit was surgical, not sentimental. "I've watched you," he said. "You listen more than you talk. You build quietly. You don't grandstand." He paused. "That's exactly what this place needs next." I didn't thank him. I didn't smile. I just opened the folder and signed the final acquisition transfer, 42% of total shares, added to the 22 I'd already accumulated through Shell Holdings over the past 6 years. Quietly, patiently, while they called me the guy who handles logistics at company events, and my wife joked about my boring spreadsheets. They thought I was just a systems analyst, a back-end guy. That's the trick. Never correct people when they underestimate you. It's like watching someone build their own blindfold. Charles stood, shook my hand, and said, "We won't announce it. I'll step down next quarter. You remain invisible, just how you like it. No press release. No LinkedIn update. No firm-wide memo." That's what I wanted. That's what power looks like when you don't need attention anymore. The empty chair in the boardroom would stay that way publicly. Privately, the real decisions would come through me. Budget approvals, compliance overrides, hiring freezes. Even the internal ethics board ran through an app one owned the licensing rights to. And my wife's boss? The one who winked at her in front of me during company picnics. The one who leaned too close when he spoke. who referred to me as Mr. Data Guy and called my wife his second half when introducing her at conferences. He didn't read the quarterly ownership ledger. He didn't notice the quiet change in meeting voting weights. He certainly didn't realize that when he started sleeping with his subordinate, my wife, he was already one violation away from Clause 14. And Clause 14? That's the one I wrote. It's tucked neatly inside the Executive Conduct Contract Addendum, approved unanimously at the last board vote, when he stepped out to take a personal call. The clause states, any relationship, intimate or otherwise, between a senior employee and a family member of a board member constitutes a conflict of interest and is grounds for immediate and irrevocable termination, retroactive to first date of discovery. He never asked what retroactive meant, but he would learn. My legal team flagged his hotel receipts before he ever even knew they were being watched. I didn't need a private investigator, just metadata. Calendar syncs. Cross-reference travel reimbursements. His room service orders never lied. Neither did the 3 Uber receipts billed to the corporate card after midnight, each one dropping him off 2 blocks from the condo I bought for my wife's solo time. He assumed I didn't know because I never asked. But you don't interrupt a storm once it's moving in your direction. You just close the windows and wait. In that boardroom, I took the seat no one saw me claim. And I left the chair physically empty, because presence is overrated when you control the floor plan. I didn't gloat, didn't even update my business card. But I made one quiet decision before I left the room. His removal would happen on Thanksgiving Day. Because humiliation doesn't just sting, it leaves a mark when it's public, personal, and timed like a sermon. And this was only the beginning. Back at the table, the cranberry sauce was beginning to congeal, the green beans sat untouched, and the air had thickened into something just short of suffocating. My son, who just 10 minutes earlier declared his allegiance to the man across from me, now wouldn't meet my eye. He stirred his potatoes like he expected them to speak first. My wife broke the silence. Okay, seriously, what is this? She asked, her voice a little too high-pitched to pass as casual. Some kind of joke? I took a slow breath and turned my gaze to her boss, who was still clutching the envelope like it might burn through his palm. You should probably explain Clause 14 of your contract, I said, tone flat as stone. He blinked. Clause what? My son asked, still trying to catch up. Her boss looked around the table like he was drowning. I think, he started, then cleared his throat, trying to collect the shredded remnants of his authority. It says, Clause 14, any direct action against a board member's family, a romantic involvement, can be considered. He looked up at me. Cause for immediate dismissal. I finished for him. Retroactive. My wife's face drained of color. Wait, what? What the hell are you talking about? I leaned back in my chair, the same one they'd made me feel like a stranger in, and rested my hands on my stomach. It means he just fired himself. Weeks ago. No, she said, shaking her head. That's not. He didn't know. That's the beauty of it, I said. Intent doesn't matter. Just outcome. Her boss set the paper down like it might detonate. This wasn't public knowledge, he whispered. No, it wasn't. But I'm not required to make my personal boundaries your public business. You made them your business when you crossed them. He opened his mouth, closed it. My son finally looked at me and said, But you're not on the board. I smiled. I own the board. It was in that moment, right there, when everything shifted. Not the big, loud kind of shift that comes with shouting or fists pounding tables. No, it was quiet. Quieter than breathing. But final. Like the last tick of a clock before the battery dies. I had spent the past year watching them all drift. My son idolized the swagger and fake charm of a man who measured status by the price of his cufflinks. My wife played house at work, pretending the real home was optional. And me? I was the fool in the flannel shirt making sure the turkey didn't burn while they auditioned for new roles in a play I hadn't even agreed to be part of. But here's the thing about scripts. The author decides who gets the final line. My wife finally found her voice again, and it came out shrill. You did this on purpose. You set him up. No, I said calmly. He did that himself. I just made sure the lights were on when the curtain fell. You can't do this, she said, trying to laugh. This isn't you. And for the first time that evening, I gave her something genuine, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. That's the problem. You've spent so long with people pretending to be something they're not. You forgot what it looks like when a man becomes exactly who he is. She looked at our son for backup. He stared at his plate like it might swallow him whole. Her boss stood, as if somehow standing would restore his dignity. We need to talk, he said. To her, not to me. You'll need to schedule it with HR, I said deadpan. assuming your badge still works tomorrow morning, which I doubt. That's when she turned back to me and said, "You're destroying our family." "No," I replied quietly. "You did that when you picked him." They had chosen new roles, without consulting the man who still built the stage. But the thing about unfamiliar futures is they're only unfamiliar if you haven't been planning them for a long, long time. And I had. Later that night, after everyone had scattered, some pretending to have other places to be, others just too ashamed to meet my eyes, I sat at my desk with a whiskey I didn't feel like drinking and opened the secure document portal. The termination file was already prepared. Signed, time-stamped, notarized. All I had to do was press send. There was no hesitation, no inner debate, just one click. A whisper through the wire that would scream louder than anything said at that Thanksgiving table. The system kicked into motion instantly. A compliance flag, a red-level internal memo, notifications sent to HR, legal, and security. No alarms, just gears turning with the efficiency of a machine I helped design before they decided I was irrelevant. No ceremony, no dramatic confrontation, just protocols. At 2:11 a.m., his employee badge pinged as revoked. At 2:13, access to the building's server was denied. By 2:17, his company email was locked, auto-reply enabled. This user is no longer with the company. I didn't need to watch it happen. I knew the process by heart. I'd written the contingency system myself, back when I was just the guy who handled back-end ops, and nobody bothered to ask what ops actually meant. But the real trigger wasn't the badge. It was the text. At 6:06 a.m., her phone buzzed. I watched from the kitchen as she picked it up, eyes still swollen from sleep, hair a mess, barefoot on the tile floor. She squinted at the screen. Then her face froze. What did he do? The message screamed in all caps. Badge disabled. Security just escorted me out. I need you to fix this. Now. A string of angry follow-ups followed, rapid fire. They're saying conflict of interest. You said he was just a tech guy. Call legal. This is insane. Her thumb hovered. She looked toward me like she expected me to ask what was wrong. Like I wasn't already 10 steps ahead. She put the phone down without replying and walked over to the table, trying to appear casual. You didn't really mean it, right? She asked. This is just posturing. You made your point. I didn't even look up from my toast. The point was made before the first glass of wine was poured. She opened her mouth, but there was nothing to say. Just the quiet tap-tap-tap of her boss's desperation piling up in blue bubbles on her screen. I took another bite of toast. What's going to happen to him? She finally asked, softer now. Don't know, I said. Probably nothing good. But then again, Clause 14 was very clear. She sat down slowly. He didn't know about that clause. Didn't he? I asked, tilting my head. He signed it, but he didn't read it. That's not my fault, I replied. Ignorance isn't a defense. You're a lawyer's wife. You should know that. Her lips tightened. Her fingers shook as she tried to sip her coffee. He's going to lose everything. I met her eyes. He already did. The truth settled between us like a lead weight. And underneath her confusion, her guilt, her performative concern, I saw it. A flicker of something uglier. Fear. Because now she was starting to understand that this wasn't a game. That I hadn't made a scene just to embarrass her or make a point. This wasn't a power play. It was an execution. Precise. Bloodless. Permanent. She picked up her phone again and stared at the unread messages. The last one stood out. You knew. You let him do this. And maybe she had. Maybe she thought she could ride the wave. That I'd eventually grumble and move on like I always did. But I didn't grumble. I planned. And now, with one clean sequence, I triggered something that couldn't be undone. Because the first domino had fallen, and her boss? He was just the opening act. The call came just after 9 a.m., while she was still pacing around in her robe, half-dressed, waiting for her so-called partner to text back something other than panicked accusations. She hadn't eaten. Her coffee had gone cold. The silence between us stretched like wire, taut and ready to snap. Then her phone rang. She glanced at it, frowning. Unknown caller, she murmured. Then tapped accept. Hello. I could hear the voice on the other end, even from the other side of the kitchen. Crisp. Corporate. Too polite to be friendly. This is Denise from HR Compliance. We're reaching out regarding an internal inquiry. Your name has come up in connection with ongoing concerns around disclosure protocols and potential ethics violations. I stirred my tea. Her posture changed immediately. Wait, I don't understand. What are you talking about? There was a pause. The HR rep continued, evenly. Specifically, We're looking into reports of an undisclosed romantic relationship with a former direct supervisor and its potential impact on internal review processes, vendor contract approvals, and executive decision-making. Her face went pale. No, no, this is a misunderstanding, she stammered. We were never. I mean, nothing was official. Romantic involvement need not be officially declared to trigger a review. Our records show at least 8 events where the two of you were logged entering after-hours corporate spaces together, including off-site properties paid for via your department card. Also, wait, how did you get all that? She interrupted. That's when she looked at me. She knew. HR didn't gather that data on their own. They were handed a file. My file. By the time she hung up, her hands were shaking. Her voice cracked. They said I might be put on administrative leave. You probably will, I said, without lifting my eyes from the morning paper. They're going to open a full investigation, she added, like maybe if she said it out loud, I'd realize it was serious. I turned a page. I know. Then the tears started. I worked so hard there, she choked. I was next in line for partner. I finally folded the paper and looked at her. No, you were next in line for a scandal. You just didn't know whose desk it would land on. She stared at me, lips trembling, red blotches forming on her neck. What did you do? She asked, voice paper thin. I stood, walked to the sink, rinsed out my mug, and said without looking back, I paid attention. That stopped her cold. Not I got revenge. Not I exposed you. Just the truth. The simplest truth. I paid attention. To her calendar. To the shifts in her tone whenever he called. To the way she always left the room to answer. To the perfume that changed on Thursdays. To the way she laughed harder when he was in the room. Smiled longer. Leaned in. To the invoices that didn't add up. To the dinner she claimed was for networking that somehow charged 2 wine tastings and a dessert cart at a boutique hotel an hour from the office. To the company retreat she forgot to tell me she extended by 2 nights. To the missing earrings I found under the passenger seat of her car, ones I never gave her. To the stories that didn't match, that unraveled under silence. To the fact that while she was performing her little escape fantasy with a man who treated PowerPoint like scripture, I was quietly collecting data like it was testimony. And now the record had been submitted. And her name wasn't just flagged. It was radioactive. Because I didn't go to war. I just removed the shield she never knew she needed. She sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. You were always so calm, she whispered. So quiet. I turned to her. That's what made you think I wasn't dangerous. Her lips parted, but she had nothing left to argue with. Just a head full of regrets and a future she'd lit on fire while laughing in another man's arms. And me? I wasn't angry anymore. Because anger is short-lived. But consequences? Consequences are patient. He showed up unannounced. Monday afternoon. I was reviewing the Q1 projections with my general counsel when I saw him through the glass wall, shoulders hunched, hands shoved in his coat pockets. The same jacket I bought him 4 Christmases ago when he still believed I was someone worth learning from. I nodded for the meeting to pause. He walked in like a man entering a courtroom with no lawyer. Dad, I didn't mean it like that, he said immediately. No hello. No small talk. Just straight to the panic. I leaned back in my chair, clasping my hands in front of me. Like what? About her boss being the future, he said. It was just a toast. A dumb joke. I didn't think it would. Would what? I asked. Matter. He hesitated. I thought it was harmless. I nodded. So did I? Once. He sat down, too fast, like if he didn't, his knees might give out. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I was just trying to, I don't know, fit in. Look confident in front of everyone. I studied him. Same mouth that used to ask me how engines worked. Same hands that I taught to throw a baseball. The boy I took to his first job interview, told him not to wear cologne like it was armor. Now looking at me like I held the key to his entire future. Because I did. You said it, I said, in front of people who matter. People who watch. Who remember. He looked down at the table. I didn't think you were serious. I slid the folder across the desk. He opened it. His eyes scanned the title. Revised Family Trust, Contingent Loyalty Clause. Then he turned to the page that mattered. There were names, entities, asset allocations, and a blank space. His name wasn't there. He looked up, mouth open. You're cutting me out? No, I said. You did that. I didn't betray you, he said, voice rising. I made a stupid comment. You made a declaration, I corrected. And you made it with pride. It was a joke, and now it's a precedent. He sat there, stunned. I watched his mind spiral. College tuition, the family house in Vermont, the trust I'd promised would pass to him on his 30th birthday. all of it unraveling. Because he finally understood, legacy doesn't just come from blood. It comes from knowing which side of the table you sit on when the knives come out. You said loyalty shouldn't be transactional, he muttered. That's what you used to tell me. And it shouldn't, I replied. But the moment you made it performative, it became something else. You toasted a man who slept with your mother, in my home. You knew what it meant, even if you didn't have the spine to admit it. He stood up, angry, embarrassed, hurt. Fine, he said. I get it. Message received. But as he turned to go, I added, the clause isn't permanent. Loyalty is a choice. So is recovery. He paused. So I have to earn it? No, I said. You have to understand it. Because this wasn't about money, or control, or even betrayal. It was about truth. And the truth was, I taught him better. I raised him to think critically, not blindly follow whatever half-charming man his mother happened to be infatuated with. But if he wanted to idolize the shallow over the steady, then he'd need to find out what that path actually bought him, and what it didn't. As the door clicked shut behind him, I turned back to my counsel. Where were we? He just nodded, eyes wide. Even he understood. Some conversations weren't business. They were legacy management. The quarterly partners' dinner was always held at the same place, a private dining club nestled above the city skyline, where the booths were leather, the wine list older than some of the junior partners, and the walls had heard more secrets than any boardroom. It wasn't a flashy event. No speeches, no branding, just an unspoken rule. If you were in that room, you were one of us. If you weren't, well, your career was already stalling and just didn't know it yet. We sent out the RSVPs discreetly, like always. The kind of invites that come in black envelopes with a single embossed name. No plus ones. No surprises. If you got one, you showed up early, dressed like power, and listened more than you spoke. This time, I made one change. 3 names were removed from the list. My wife's boss, my son, and my wife. Her boss had already been scorched earth. The company directories had been scrubbed, his bio pulled from the site, even the Christmas card list adjusted. His exit had been quiet in public, but behind closed doors, people whispered about it like it was a morality play. Executives who used to fawn over him now returned emails with carefully worded sympathy, their condolences laced with distance. The scent of liability clung to him like cologne. My son never got an invite, and he knew better than to ask. But my wife? She still didn't believe the door was closed. She showed up 37 minutes after the dinner began. Black dress, hair pinned up the way she wore it back when I still loved her, heels clicking like they announced royalty. She walked straight past the doorman, through the marble lobby, and right up to the host's stand like nothing had happened. The hostess checked the list. Her brows lifted politely. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the reservation list. My wife smiled, that tight, performative smile she always used when correcting service staff. That's impossible. My husband is the CEO. The hostess didn't flinch. I understand. But this is a closed-door event. Guests must be pre-cleared. She leaned in, confident, voice dripping with fake warmth. Let him know I'm here. I did, the hostess replied. He asked us to wish you a pleasant evening. That's when the security guard behind the hostess took a single step forward. Not threatening, just present. My wife blinked, then laughed, nervously. You're joking. The hostess smiled, polite, not warm. No, ma'am. I'm not. She stood there for a full 10 seconds. Processing. The reality washing over her, not like a wave, but a slow seep. Her confidence faltered. Shoulders dropped a fraction. The room behind the glass wall, where laughter echoed and wine flowed, might as well have been the moon. She tried again. I'm his wife. No. The hostess said quietly, you're not on the list. She turned then, slowly, heels no longer clicking, just tapping, and walked out. Inside, the dinner continued. Conversations bloomed. Deals were hinted at, then shelved for later drinks. I shook hands. I toasted with partners who, just a month ago, had been dazzled by the charisma of the man now erased from every internal document. Not one person mentioned him. That's how it works, you know. You don't get exiled with a bang. You get replaced with silence. The only person who dared bring up my wife was an old partner from Chicago. As dessert was served, he leaned in and asked with a sly grin. That was her at the door, wasn't it? I didn't flinch. Some people think the rules don't apply to them, I said, calmly. Until the invitation stops coming. He chuckled. Cold. No. I corrected, swirling my wine. Clean. Because power isn't about volume. It's about access. And once it's revoked, you don't knock louder. You realize the room was never yours to begin with. The first photo surfaced 4 days after the partners' dinner. A blurry shot, clearly taken with someone's phone at Thanksgiving. It showed the table, plates full, glasses mid-toast. My son standing, grinning. Her boss laughing, mid-sip. My wife leaning into him with a smile so wide, it might have been rehearsed. And in the far left corner of the frame, me. Sitting still, watching. The caption read, "Thanksgiving toast gone wrong?" The post didn't get much traction at first. A couple dozen shares. A few comments about office affairs. But then someone from the industry picked it up. Someone who knew. A former analyst who now ran a niche finance gossip blog with a modest but loyal following in the corporate world. He wrote a short, biting piece. Nothing sensational. Just enough detail to pique the right readers. Headline: Work husband toast ends in boardroom termination. Real husband was the owner. The subtext? Brutal. You never know who's actually holding the sword until someone bleeds. By noon, it had made its way to private Slack channels, internal newsletters, group chats. Consultants love a scandal almost as much as they love a non-disclosure agreement. The silence that followed wasn't the quiet before a storm, it was the storm. No one said anything, but everything changed. Her boss disappeared from LinkedIn. First his job title vanished, then his profile photo, then the whole account. As if erasing the evidence might undo the collapse. He wasn't fired. He was scrubbed. My wife's colleagues stopped copying her on chain emails. Her mentor at the firm stopped replying to her check-ins. The invites to alumni panels dried up. Her assistant, who once called her a force, requested a transfer. And her circle of weekend friends? The Pilates moms, the brunch crew, the wine club? Radio silence. At first, she thought it was just the holidays. Then, maybe bad signal. Then, she started texting more often. Short bursts of desperation, carefully masked as casual. "Hey, miss our walks. Going to bar tomorrow? Should we plan a New Year's dinner?" No responses. Not even read receipts. And the gym? That hit last. Her trainer texted, "Hey, something came up. Need to pause sessions for a while." "Sorry," she responded. "No worries. Let me know when we're back on." He never did. She started staying home more. Saying she felt tired. Said it was burnout. Said she needed time to reflect. She stopped posting. The Instagram stories vanished. The outfits got simpler. The makeup lighter. Like if she shrank small enough, the world might unsee what it saw. And me? I didn't say a word. I didn't share the article. Didn't leak a single email. Didn't correct the narrative. I didn't need to. Because the thing about whispers is they're faster than announcements. They spread without asking permission. They reshape reputations without a single lawsuit or press release. The real punishment wasn't loss of money or title. It was irrelevance. It was realizing that the same people who once begged for her attention were now quietly removing her from spreadsheets, from mailing lists, from group photos. It was watching the lights turn off one by one, and knowing they weren't coming back on. At dinner, she'd ask vague questions like, "Did you see that article?" Or crazy how people jump to conclusions, right? I'd nod. People love drama. But I never addressed it directly. That was the point. She didn't need me to confirm anything. The absence of denial was louder. And every day, she was learning what it meant to be forgotten. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in the slow, indifferent turning of 1,000 polite shoulders. She hadn't just lost her place. She'd lost the illusion that it was ever hers to begin with. She texted me on a Wednesday evening. Just one line. "Dinner? Just us. No drama. Please." I didn't answer right away. She followed it with another. "I'll be at Trato Real on 6th. Our old spot. 7 p.m. I'll wait." I arrived at 7:12. Deliberately. She was already seated, back straight, cloth napkin folded perfectly in her lap, like it was 1,995 again. Candles on the table. 2 glasses of Malbec. Hers untouched, mine full. She was wearing the green silk dress. The dress. The one she wore the night of our first anniversary when we still looked at each other like we hadn't finished speaking yet. Back when she would reach across the table and touch my wrist just to remind herself I was there. Now she barely looked up as I pulled out the chair. "You're late," she said softly, almost playful. "I'm not," I replied. "I just arrived exactly when I meant to." That pulled a frown from her. Not confusion. Recognition. The waiter came by. I waved him off. She smiled. A tight one. Practiced. Fragile. "I made mistakes," she began, voice just above a whisper. "Big ones. I know that." I waited. I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought he understood me. That we were partners. I nodded once. Not agreement, acknowledgement. Her eyes watered, but no tears fell. I got lost. I confused attention for love. And comfort for weakness. There it was. I tilted my head. Comfort. She blinked. You never fought. Never raised your voice. You were just there? Steady. I guess I thought you didn't care. I leaned forward. And he cared because he bought you lunch and laughed too loud in meetings? She flinched. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said. I just didn't think you'd ever leave. That sentence sat between us like a third person. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photo. Us at a beach in Monterey, 20 years ago. I was holding her hand. We were both laughing. She placed it on the table like it was currency. Can we start over? She asked. I stared at the photo, then pulled another from my jacket pocket. This one freshly printed. Sharp, cold lighting. The Thanksgiving table. She's mid-laugh. Her boss is raising a glass, smirking, surrounded by plates of food I'd paid for and people who hadn't looked at me once. And in the far right corner, blurred by distance but unmistakable, me, sitting quietly, watching, unseen. I slid it across the table. Her hand stopped midway reaching for mine. What's this? She asked, already knowing. The moment everything started over, I said. She looked at it like it might catch fire. You really won't try? I did, I said. For 30 years. She tried to speak, but the words faltered. She looked older than she had even a week ago. Smaller. Like reality had finally settled in and hollowed out the performance. I'm not the villain, she whispered. I never said you were, I replied. But you're not the victim either. The waiter returned. She didn't order. I didn't either. She looked at the door, then at me, then back at the Thanksgiving photo. So that's it. I stood. No, that was it, I said, tapping the photo gently. She didn't follow me out. Didn't call. Didn't beg. Because deep down, even she knew, there was no script left. No lines to say that could glue the broken set pieces back together. She'd already delivered her final scene, and I'd already exited the stage. The Winter Summit was held downtown, top floor of the company's new HQ, where glass wrapped the building like a crown and every hallway echoed with intention. It was the kind of event I used to be told about secondhand through my wife's smug debriefs. Charles made a toast, she'd say, and we all clapped. You should have seen the view. Back then, I was the man who stayed home and paid the bills. Now, I was the reason the doors opened. They'd held my seat in shadow for nearly a year. First behind closed board meetings, then in quiet memos, then in project approvals signed only with my initials. Everyone felt my presence. They just didn't know whose shadow they were operating under. Until now. This time, I didn't hide. A slate backdrop bore the company's founding principles. Etched in steel, backlit, dramatic without being theatrical. And next to them, a new column, Leadership 2025, followed by a single name at the top. Mine. There was no speechwriter. I didn't need one. The room full of partners, executives, junior analysts, department heads. All of them knew the story already, or enough of it to understand this wasn't a promotion. It was a reveal. I walked up to the podium without applause. I hadn't earned claps yet, not in this room. But by the time I was done, they would clap. Not because I told them to, but because they'd realized they'd been following me long before they ever knew I existed. Behind me stood the new board, leaner, sharper, chosen for their discipline, not their showmanship. There was one empty chair. I gestured to it. That seat, I said, will remain unfilled. It's reserved. A few eyebrows lifted. One brave young exec asked, for who? I smiled. Not cruel, not smug, just certain. For those who never had to announce they were the future. The room fell quiet, then laughter broke. Not forced, real, sharp. Then came the applause. The moment they all got it. That the loudest men often burn out before they rise. That true leadership doesn't need a stage, it just quietly owns it. Through the glass wall, I saw them. My wife. In her car. Parked across the street. Engine off. Alone. My son in the passenger seat, staring forward. They weren't there to celebrate. They weren't even supposed to be there. But they were watching. And that was the difference. They weren't banned. They just no longer mattered. They chose another path. One paved with applause for the wrong man, loyalty to charisma instead of character. They'd mistaken volume for strength. And now they sat outside, watching a door they couldn't open, a room that no longer had space for them. Inside, I shook hands. Toasted. Reclaimed not just my name, but my legacy. No revenge speech. No takedown montage. Just a man finally standing where he'd always belonged, without ever once needing to shout for it. And outside, the future they'd toasted sat still in park, watching a world move forward without them.